Welcome everyone, Nick Wagner Sr. It's Sunday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, which means we're doing another episode of the Full Potential Podcast. Super excited for tonight's guest, and I'll have Megan introduce herself in a second. But every Sunday night, Megan, we sit down with who I believe is an inspirational guest to hear about their career journey. And why I do this is because I believe that a lot of people can learn quite a bit from others' career journeys since everyone is so unique. And so we'll always talk about that guest's career and what worked well, what didn't work well, that the highs, the lows, and really dive into what has made them so successful. So I appreciate you making time, and we do this live, so we're it's like live TV. So I always joke with the guests, no swearing because we can't edit it out. And then we stream this to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and then I'll take the audio and we'll turn it into the Full Potential Podcast, which we share on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And I know you are no stranger to podcasts, so you are aware of how that works. So we will go ahead and get started. So Megan Clark Torrey, welcome to the Full Potential Podcast, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
So I'm really excited to talk about your career journey, Megan, and dive into what is the World Affairs Council that you lead here in Connecticut. I know we'll get to that, but I want to first start because I always like to ask the question when I bring guests on is when you meet someone for the first time. So you're at a networking event pre-COVID. You were when you actually got to see people in person, and someone met you for the first time, and they ask you who are you or what do you do? How do you answer that, Megan? What's your story?
No, absolutely. I think what the most important things that people need to know about me are that I am dedicated to engaging in the world. I'm dedicated to connecting our communities to critical global issues, and that I am an explorer and a traveler of the entire world.
All right, well said, and we'll dive into a lot more about what that means. But I wanna start with I always start with people's journeys at the beginning because everyone's career I believe is molded by how they were brought up and did they go to college, did they not go to college. So you run an organization, so you're the CEO of an organization, the World Affairs Council, and it says you have a small team, but you do an amazing amount of work. You do great work for the state of Connecticut. When you were a little girl, like way back in elementary school, was your goal to be the CEO of an organization and talk, about, international topics and try to educate the people of a state on what's going on around the world, or did you have different plans when you were a little kid?
Well, what I always knew is that I loved learning about the world, always. And I was a very tenacious young person. So there wasn't anything that could stop me. So I always also knew that whatever I ended up doing had to be something that contributed to a greater good. That was always something that was instilled in me since I was very young. And so sort of have been relentless in my pursuit of doing something that would really fulfill me.
So that's interesting. So you always liked learning about the world and what was going on in the world. You obviously didn't know you'd be running this organization, but you had a sense of that you wanted to do something that was global in nature, even from a young age. I find that really interesting because I think a lot of people really don't know, right, when they're little.
Oh, I think like you say, everyone has a different journey. I've always been fascinated with other cultures, with world history, global events, even from when I was very young.
That's very cool. So my follow up to that then is when you were you went to the Central Connecticut State University for International Relations and Affairs.
Mhm.
Was I'm assuming that was by design, right? Based off of what you just said. Did you have any sense of what you wanted to do after you graduated from college with that degree? Like, because I feel like international relations and affairs, the first thing that pops in my mind, right? And I don't know your space at all. The first thing I think of is like diplomat or State Department or something in the government that would work with other countries. What was your thought going into that major?
So, international relations was a vehicle for me to learn and engage in the world, and I have always been interested in foreign policy. And I think a lot of people who take a degree in international relations, in diplomacy, have some kind of interest in diplomacy, maybe working for the State Department, maybe working for an international aid organization. I don't think that I ever had a mindset with exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that whatever I did, it needed to be global, because that is really my passion.
Yeah, it's and I can imagine that the other individuals you went to school with, if you kept in touch with them, you're probably all doing very different things, if I had to guess, that had that major from Central. So what, you graduate with this degree, because I always think, I always mention, I have a lot of early career individuals that listen to this podcast, and a lot of them are either in their first job or they're still in college trying to find their first job. What was it like to take that degree and go find a job? Because I feel like you were probably looking for something very specific. It wasn't like you went to be an accountant and you could be an accountant at name the number of companies. So how did you target your job search with that degree? And my follow-up to that, my second question would be, how did you end up at the World Affairs Council of Connecticut? And maybe you can tie those together for our audience.
So that's a really interesting question. And I think a lot of people with international relations degrees don't ever end up working in the field. I think it's a very generalized degree, very similar to maybe political science. But if you remember, I was very tenacious. So I was never going to give up on my, hopes and dreams of doing something very global. And finding the World Affairs Council was quite almost a fluke. I had been living abroad and I had moved home, and knew that I was going to be staying in the area for a while. And so targeted a job search around all things global in the area, and found an organization called the World Affairs Council of Connecticut. Again, a small team. And it was just great timing, because the one job opening they had within the 5-year period, just happened to be when I applied.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when I talk to people about job searches, obviously sometimes it's patience, and you obviously have to have the credentials, but sometimes there's some luck involved, right? Like you mentioned, like the one time there was a job opening happened when you were looking. So you didn't know about this organization while you were at Central going to college?
I didn't.
Interesting.
And
okay.
So now it's my goal to make sure that more and more people know about what we're doing.
So let me ask this. So you applied to this organization. You mentioned it's a small organization. So
yep.
What was the, I guess my question for you is, like, what was that like, going to such a small organization for your first job out of college? Or did you not know anything different? So you were kind of like, oh, this works.
So Nick, actually, let me tell you about my first job out of college. I actually worked for the Connecticut State Legislature.
Oh, interesting. Okay. What did you do for them?
So I was a clerk on the GAE committee at the time, was co-chaired by our now Lieutenant Governor, Susan Bysiewicz. So it was a very interesting first job out of college in learning the process of government and the process of bills, and still take some of those skills in understanding how our local government works.
Interesting. Okay, so that you did that before you made it to the World Affairs Council,
right? Yeah.
So share with our audience, what is the World Affairs Council of Connecticut? I want to start with what is it, and not only what is it, but how is it? Like what is the how is it actually made up, right? So is it a nonprofit? Is it for profit? Share a little bit about the organization, because I know one thing that you're passionate about, Megan, is making sure people know what it is. But so I want you to share what that is, and then also share that we have a lot of guests that aren't in Connecticut. Are there more of these in other states, is my second question.
Absolutely. So as you know, Nick, this is probably my favorite thing to talk about. The World Affairs Council is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We are dedicated to engaging our communities in critical global issues. And here in Connecticut, we have been in existence since 1924.
Wow.
We're almost 100 years old. We are part of the World Affairs Councils of America system. And so there are about 94 World Affairs Councils across the US, and they are great places to go for communities to learn about what's happening in the world, to connect with people who want to engage in the world, to travel the world, and to explore what is happening. Why is any of that important? So about a year and a half ago, what I would have said is, why is it important if someone in rural India puts down their pitchfork and moves to a big city? And then you would hear me go into a long story about what's happening at Pratt and Whitney, and how that person is going on a plane, and those engines are made in East Hartford. But now, since last year, all I have to say is, why is it important what happens in Wuhan, China?
Right, because of COVID, of course.
Right, because all of us are globally connected. And so throughout the year, the World Affairs Council fulfills its mission by bringing in speakers from around the world, by engaging with our local communities in helping them navigate these global issues. We also have a long-standing Model United Nations program for Connecticut high school students that we have been growing and growing and growing through the years, and had hit about 1,200 high school students from around the state of Connecticut who are engaging in the world, learning how to be global citizens and learning how to work across cultures, and helping prepare them to enter the global workforce that all of us are in.
So you just shared a lot. I want to just highlight a couple things. I love that you're almost approaching your 100-year anniversary. So hopefully there's going to be a big celebration in 2024 for that.
Let's hope we all have our vaccines and we're all able to make it in person.
Make it in person. I think it's really fantastic that it's a nonprofit. So I love to hear that. And I also think it's really important that it's nonpartisan. I think that's actually a really important point that you make, because I think educating the world on world affairs and not spinning it one way or the other, I think is really critical in the world that we live in today, with the way that we with news and social media. I love to hear that. So I think that's awesome. I want to ask about what drew you though to this first job as program director. Mm-hmm. And so this was 18 years ago when you joined the organization.
Oh man.
Not to, a little bit of history, right? But what drew you to the organization? And when you took that job in February of 2003, I want to go back to your first day. What did you think to yourself on the first day you walked into that organization, like, I'm going to run this one day? Or did you not know or were you just excited to be there? Well, I want to hear about that.
Right. So one thing I did know is that I had worked in smaller organizations before. Are working in a smaller organization, each team member plays such an integral part. Each team member is so empowered to make decisions, to have latitude to explore their job. I didn't necessarily know what I was walking into the first day, so many years ago. And I have to say, it was a very different organization than it is today. I didn't think that I would end up running it. But through hard work, perseverance, I did. And we've been able to sort of transform the work.
Yeah. And I bring that day up, Megan, because I think that first day for a lot of people is such a memorable one at a company, especially when they've been there for a substantial period of time. So you might not have realized that you were going to run it one day, but did you get the sense when you got there and you were there for a few months that it was a special place?
Anyone who works for a nonprofit, and I hope this is the case for everybody who works for a nonprofit, you do it because you believe in the mission. You work really hard when you work at a nonprofit, and you don't necessarily get those sort of monetary gains, but what you get is the satisfaction that you're doing something that's contributing to a greater good every day, day in, day out, every hour. And so I think within the first year of me working at the World Affairs Council, I had met at least 3 of the authors of the books of the texts that I was, reading and writing about in graduate school. And here they are, literally I'm shaking their hands. So that was pretty cool for me. Right. And so getting an opportunity to explore so many issues, so many changing issues was pretty cool. And that became apparent right away.
So I love that, and I love your passion. I can just tell how much you love talking about the work that you do. But I want to pivot back to your career. So, and we'll dive more into the World Affairs Council once we get to your tenure as CEO. But I want to talk about a lot of guests that I have on the show are in large corporations. And one of the things we talk about with large corporations is like, how do you find your next job, right? You're in a company of 50,000 people. How on earth do you find your next job? You're in an organization of five, right? Five, 5 to 7 maybe tops. And you went from program director to interim executive director to executive director to CEO. I want to ask the question because I think this is really important because there might be some listeners that want to work at a smaller organization. What is it like navigating finding your next job at an organization as small as the one that you were in? Right? How does that work? Because obviously there's not dozens or hundreds of jobs to choose from. So how do you navigate your way and position yourself to find that next position in a small company or a small organization?
Right. So it's a really good question. I had one of my predecessors really invested a lot in me and gave me a lot of latitude to learn the ropes, explore what we do. And I was able to get pretty good at what I did. So when it's a small organization and it's time for succession planning, oftentimes those internal candidates are the ones that are looked for, the ones with the institutional knowledge to help the organization continue, but also ones that have been, identified as having creativity and having, innovative thoughts.
At what point did you, or maybe you didn't, maybe they just asked, did you tell them that you were interested in at one point moving up to the next level, eventually running the organization, or did they come to you? How did that work?
It's really interesting because I did express my interest in becoming, at the time going from interim to executive director, and there were two schools. Some didn't necessarily think that I had what it took, but I also had a great team of people who had worked with me quite closely and recognized that recognized my talent, recognized my potential. And I will forever be grateful for those people who were my advocates, were my mentors, were the people that said, no, this is the person and we believe that she can do it. And therefore giving me the power to say, yeah, I'm going to go for this. And that sort of changed my path.
And I love that you brought that up because I think telling people that you are interested or what you are looking for or that you want that job or that you want that position is so critical, because if you don't tell people, how are they going to know? And oftentimes people are afraid to actually step up and say that. So I love that you said that, and now look, you're the CEO, right? So clearly that worked. But I do appreciate you sharing that. We think a lot of people are they're intimidated to step up and say those things. So thank you. So when you went from executive director to CEO, how did that change? How did that change your perspective on the organization? Because now as CEO, you run the entire organization, and you drive the mission, you drive the strategy. My assumption would be that as the CEO, you are involved with a lot of the decisions on hiring, but also fundraising, since you're a nonprofit, and finding grants and donors. It's been over 3 years now. How has that been going as CEO?
So fantastic, quite frankly, right? So anyone who works for a nonprofit or anyone who works in a smaller organization knows everybody wears, 7 to 8 hats, not even 3, right? So it's like 7 to 8 hats. And we have, thankfully through hard work and dedication, have had a really successful 3 years. We are living at a time that what we do couldn't be more relevant to the dialogue today. And so recognizing that and using that as an opportunity at every corner to figure out where you can engage, figure out what your community is thinking about, what issues are important to your community, it's what we do every day, and it has been a successful 3 years.
It's interesting because I was listening to one of your podcasts, which if people want to check out your podcast, they can go to your website, which we will link to. I want to make sure we say this, Megan. We'll link to your LinkedIn profile in the show description, and we'll also link to the World Affairs Council webpage as well, where you can find your podcast. But I think you bring up a great point about just how relevant what your organization is doing today versus you mentioned a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, as a globally connected world. And there are so many topics. I mean, and we could probably talk about the topics that impact Connecticut and the United States for literally hours, right?
Right.
From that perspective. But you bring up a lot of great topics on the podcast and really dive into some really interesting things. So if people are interested in learning more, they can obviously check out the podcast. But I want to jump back to you as CEO. That's a big title, and I think that for a lot of people, right, that might be intimidating. I'd love for you to share a little bit with the audience. What are some of the things you've loved about being the CEO, and maybe something that's been really challenging about being CEO.
So in general, you probably can tell, I really do love my job, and it allows me such an opportunity to be a voice in the community, to stand up and talk about why these issues are important, and to sort of be the advocate for connecting our community to the world. There are many challenges, especially when you're working at a nonprofit, especially in this environment, right? Fundraising is always a challenge. Growing the organization is always a challenge, but we've been successful. But it's not an easy task. It is hard work, dedication, drive, hustle.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned, I mean, you've been around since 1924, so clearly, I think Connecticut values the work that the organization is doing, right? And as well, the organizations that support you, right, whether it's through grants or donations, are obviously passionate about the work that you do as well. So I love that. You mentioned, working with a small team and wearing multiple hats, and I want to go back to that point because I think for a lot of people, so I work in a very large company in my day to day. I work for a Fortune 15 company, and I work in human resources, and I focus on a very specific thing, right? You mentioned when you're in a smaller organization, it doesn't have to be a nonprofit; it could be a small for-profit too. You end up doing quite a few different things. And my question for you is, for those that, like I said, for the early career professionals listening, they're coming out of college. What's your recommendation for someone who's new to how to balance something like that, right? Because if someone came to work for you, Megan, at your organization, they might get asked to do things that they've never done before, right? Just because of the nature of, there's only so many of you. How do you recommend people approach that are earlier in their careers?
So, I mean, I think it is a matter of understanding where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. I'm very careful to make sure what roles we give our team members are well suited to their skill sets, and expanding those skills that they want to learn, right? So I really just want to make sure that it's a great fit. When you first come into a small organization, we have a lot of interns that come in that maybe haven't worked in an office before. And so we want to make sure that they're exposed to learning as many skills as possible, but also touching base with them to see how comfortable you are. And so if you're in the other seat, just come in with an open mind, come in with determination and understanding that this is a learning experience and you're not always going to get it right. And when you don't get it right, make sure you're telling someone, right? Because that's okay. That's just how you learn. That's how we all get better. But just, I think it's a very exciting thing to be part of a small team and to get the opportunity to learn so many things.
Yeah, no, I love the being able to admit something didn't go well and then learn from it. I think it's such a powerful powerful thing to learn for so many of us. So I love how you shared that. So I want to, I know we talked a lot about your career and the journey. I want to talk about World Affairs Council, and I want to talk a little bit about what has that been like running the organization during COVID for, the past 9, 10 months, and how maybe has the organization pivoted because of that. And what's something you're really looking forward to in 2021 that you have planned?
Oh, absolutely. So, as we were able to transform the work of the council. So I think the last day that all of us were in the office was March 11, 2020. And I think by March 16th, we had reimagined some of the things that we would do, right? So instead of doing things that were live, we switched to virtual. And instead of doing a format, maybe, lots of panels, lots of, you know, uh, in-person, contact, what we did is switch to a podcast, and what we did is make it interactive. And so we were able to do that quickly. And then we were able to lead a week-long showcase of what all of the World Affairs Councils do across the US. And now, going into 21, we have even more that we're going to be doing. Right now, we're, operating completely virtual, and we will continue to do that. As long as we have to, until it is safe for everybody to go back. The council does so many exciting things throughout the year. We have what we'll call our pillar programs. And so these are things we do year to year. And one of the things that we do every single year, and at least this is now going into our 4th year, is our Global Security Forum. And it's one of the things that sort of propelled me into being CEO. And so it is a conference that focuses on some of the most important security issues that are happening in the world. And that is so particularly important to us living here in Connecticut, because so much of our economy is driven by defense in the defense industry. And if we don't understand the forces that are shaping the defense industry, we're not necessarily fully engaging as citizens. So I'm looking forward to that. That won't be happening until the fall, but until then, we always do something really important for International Women's Day, which is in early March, and then we will be hosting a Diplomat Week for our business community to contact, to get in touch with the world in late March. So something for everybody.
That's really cool, and I love the I love the focus on moving virtually, and I'm actually gonna guess that you're probably reaching even more people now that you're doing it completely virtually versus in person, because people that probably couldn't make it in person before might now be able to take part in more of your events because they are virtual.
That, as well as not having any geographic boundaries, right? So,
Right, right.
we have people that are coming from quite literally all over the world.
Yeah, that is true, right? So no, and again, you've had some amazing some guests that you've hosted either virtually or in person over the years, and people can go check those out. I mean, like some really big names on that. I don't know how you land these individuals for these interviews, but really awesome guests. So I'll let people go to your website and check those out. But and so I want to just first say thank you again for joining tonight and sharing a little bit about your career journey and your passion for everything that you do on a day-to-day basis with your nonprofit. I always close with the same question, Megan, which is, what is it that you've done in your career that's helped you reach your full potential? So you've been very successful, obviously, going from just joining this organization to now being the CEO. What has been that thing that's helped you be so successful throughout your career that you would want to share with my audience?
So I just want to encourage everyone to be relentless in your pursuit of your success. And honestly, never let anybody tell you you can't do something that you absolutely know you can do. I've been successful because I have always driven forward, and always believed in myself. And as long as you do that and you find something you love, you'll be fine.
Can I ask you? I think that's fantastic advice. Where did you learn that growing up?
I think it's innate and inherent, right? So
So it's just been Megan since you were
Part
a
of
little
who
kid.
I
It's
am.
part
Yeah.
of who you are. And I'm sure if you asked your team, they would probably agree with that, because I'm sure that a big part of the World Affairs Council is you pushing the organization forward, and not only the organization but the people that work for you. So so thank you so much for making time. I think you've given some great ideas for people to think about, sharing your experiences throughout your journey. Again, we will make sure to link to your LinkedIn profile, and then I'll give the World Affairs Council website as well. It's ctwac.org, but we'll put that in the show description as well if people want to check out all the different content that you're all doing, whether it's a podcast or a video or an event or something education related. And then if they want to get in touch with you, they can obviously get in touch with you through LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you, Megan. It was great seeing you and having the discussion. Stay well, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.